Ask the Coach 8 with Nick Sellers. How are you, Nick?
I'm very well, thanks, Andrew. Had a bit of a chesty cough, but I'm past the worst of it. Hopefully, it won't interfere in our conversation today.
Excellent. Glad to hear you're on the mend.
Thank you.
So for this week, Nick, I recently turned 40 and I started my 18th year in recruitment. It got me thinking, I don't know feel anywhere near this stage, but it did get me thinking at what point do age and experience stop being valued and seen as an advantage? And when does it become a potential hurdle? I'd love to get your thoughts on this.
Hmm. Um, you know, it, Age and experience are two of the factors that I think are taken into account when recruiting. Now, I know that strictly speaking, age shouldn't be a factor, and so we're in an age now where CVs are not expected to have date of birth on them, not expected to have marital status and all of that kind of stuff. But I do feel as though sometimes recruiting managers are looking at candidates and making a judgment as to whether or not age is a factor they need to take account of. For me, much more important is experience. Does the person who's the candidate, does the person who's already working for the company and in a particular role and maybe being considered for their next role, do they bring experience that's relevant? And it's not just experience, it's also skills as well. Somebody may not have the experience for the role, but they bring skills that they've developed which could be applied in that role. So I would say I don't think age and experience are really the big factors, certainly not age, but I do think experience, skills, demeanor is another one as well. Does this person just have that feel about them that they've got energy, they've got focus, they've got all of the attributes that the business needs?
Yeah, good point, Nick. Definitely agree. I don't know if you've come across this in your career, Nick, but sometimes you get the impression that people don't hire people potentially who are later in their career due to their experience, partly because potentially that person feels threatened by the level of experience that that person's bringing into the role, and that they may have more experience than their seniors. Is that something you've come across in your career and some of the organisations you've worked with?
Yeah, there is something about that. I think sometimes the experience that a candidate brings may actually feel like it's a threat to the recruiting manager or to those that are seniors, as you mentioned. I think it ought not to be. Somebody might bring bags of experience, but actually be quite happy not to be the head of. You know, they bring lots of experience. They've maybe had those high flying jobs, high pressure jobs, and are now at a stage where, for maybe the last 4 or 5 years of their working life, they're actually happy just to kind of step back from that, bring their experience, bring the skills that they've developed over all those years, but actually just be part of the team.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree. Often I'll speak with very experienced professionals and they don't want that leadership role. They want to be, a technical expert and bring that value into the team.
Yeah.
And I agree often, it's not something to be threatened by. And I think increasingly more common is I speak to, very seasoned and experienced professionals who are in their 50s or 60s. Bearing in mind, think what's the pension age now is 67. So,
Yeah.
60 is not necessarily old. You could have a good 10 years left in your career, of course, it's and bring huge value to an organisation. But they're usually pretty candid with me and they may say that they're looking for their last move
Yeah.
before retirement. So how can people at that stage of their career maintain their enthusiasm and energy for work, even as they approach the end of their career?
Actually, I think even the fact that people are saying to you, I'm looking for my last move before I retire, shows that they've got, I'm going to call it, a bit of fire left in their belly, that they're actually still interested in broadening their horizons. And those are things that are attributes that I think are really valuable for companies, for employers to take account of. If somebody has kind of like checked out already, and let's face it, we can check out at any age. It's not just when you get to your 50s and 60s. Sometimes people are checking out much earlier than that. But somebody that's got that spark of interest in learning something new, going into a new business culture, a new business environment. Those are people that I would say, you might only get 4 years out of them, 5 years out of them, but they should be good 4 or 5 years. And let's face it, who stays in the same job for much longer than 4 or 5 years now? Even people that have worked for a company for 20 years have likely changed role every 3 or 4.
Yeah, and a really good point, Nick. I think Gen Z or Gen Z, the average tenure is less than 2 years. And
Right.
I have had clients in the past tell me, somebody's 60, they don't have a long-term future with the business. And I think the
Yeah.
reality is they could hire a 22-year-old, and the 60-year-old is likely to stay with the business and contribute more over the
Yeah.
next period than the 22-year-old. And that's the reality of it. I think employers do need to, get away from that preconception.
Yeah.
I think a big thing, Nick, and even, like I say, I just turned 40, and I do notice a big difference in communication styles between even my generation
Yeah.
and graduates coming out of university now, or newly qualified accountants in their early 20s.
Yeah.
And also notice a big difference in the style of how they like to communicate. I'd say that they're a lot more comfortable communicating on the likes of WhatsApp or email, whereas I find people of my age and older would rather meet in person or pick up the phone. And I definitely feel that's a generational shift
Yeah.
that's happened recently. So from your experience, how can professionals adapt their communication style to more effectively engage and mentor younger colleagues who may have those difference in communication preferences?
Yeah. Okay. Good question. So communication's a two-way street. Okay. If I push a message to you, I could argue that I've communicated with you, but unless you actually received that message, understood it, and acknowledged it, I can't guarantee anything. So
Mm.
communication being a two-way street, I think then we start to look at styles of communication, channels of communication. And it may be, I always found that when I was running projects, if we could do a face-to-face kickoff meeting, the project generally went quicker and more smoothly after that, even if we didn't meet face-to-face again. And so I would say for anybody that's wanting to communicate across generations or across preferred styles, it's about generally kind of finding out where people are at and actually getting things going in the right way, having that openness of communication, that honesty of communication that you need to be able to reach whatever you're striving for.
Yeah, I think
I definitely wouldn't want to stereotype too hard because I think all the communication channels, face to face, telephone, email, SMS, WhatsApp, however people want to communicate, they've all got a value of their own. And I think we just need to figure out what is it that's going to work best for that communication.
absolutely. I think you raise a good point, Nick, about ideally having that in-person, face-to-face contact early on in the communication. I used to work with a chap, and he said if you've not met someone, they don't really exist. And what he was getting at essentially is the relationship's a lot more transactional if you've not met that person in person. And I
Yeah,
absolutely agree with that. And, we can all be bad sometimes for it's too easy to you jump on a video call or a phone call. But yeah, I like your point, and I think that's true. That really to understand the communication style fully that you need to use going forward, having that in
yeah.
person meetings important.
And the other thing, Andrew, I would say is that there's the classic kind of know, like, trust. Communication is a vital part of relationship. How do you get to know somebody? How do you get to like them? How do you get to trust them? It's through communicating, and those communications are not always just verbal. They're not always even visual. You can almost sense sometimes when somebody is knowing, liking, trusting you.
Just to flip that around slightly, Nick, I've asked, how can more senior professionals communicate with junior professionals? On the flip side, I'll quite often get messages now from early career professionals, not too early career, they're still professionally qualified, and they'll say, hey, mate, like quite an informal communication style. And I suppose I'm I would say, the kind of crossroads where that communication style is probably all right,
Yeah.
I know for a fact that for me to speak to certain senior professionals and approach them in that manner wouldn't go down well. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think this is where we need a bit of intelligence. We need a bit of sensitivity around communication styles. What is appropriate? Somebody that's kind of doing "Hey, dude" to somebody that they've barely met might have actually just assumed that that communication style works for them and their friends, and therefore will work when I'm actually trying to communicate with the managing director. I think we've all got to adapt our style depending on who we're actually interacting with. And it's also a bit about choosing the communication channel appropriately as well. That using WhatsApp is great, it's fine, but it may be that for confidential information, it may, sorry, that's a bad example. I might have to reverse back out of that. It may be that choosing WhatsApp is fine for like informal communications, but if you're going to communicate something formally, it might have to be that it goes through email or something along those lines.
Yeah. So other point I suppose is that communication is both verbal and non-verbal, and something that I've heard repeatedly actually over the past year or two within professional services, and it's not probably due to the not the fault of the younger professionals coming through, but because of COVID, they've not necessarily had that face time with clients and
Yeah.
senior peers that they would have had in the past. And really, for that reason, at this stage of their career, where they should be confident working face to face with clients and communicating with them, the senior professionals feel that their communication skills and confidence is not quite where it should be. Is that something that just takes time to develop, or is that something that companies should be investing in and coaching staff to do?
Uh, Coaching staff, that's where my mind was going as you were asking that question. Yeah, you can leave people to figure it out for themselves. Some people will get it really quickly and others will never get it. But coaching staff is so important. Managers can coach their team as to what they reckon is the appropriate style and channel of communication for certain messages. And I think therein lies the answer, that actually those that are more experienced, those that are more senior, should be setting out the guidance. They should be offering, and it's even asking people to put themselves in other people's shoes. How would you feel if you got that kind of communication through that channel on that topic? So yeah, I think this is just part of who we are as people, is that those that are older, more responsible, etc., more experienced, should be coaching those that we can help.
So a big area I do feel that younger professionals are missing out on in this world of hybrid working is when I was starting my career, a lot of the coaching was fairly informal. It might be that I would shadow someone on a meeting or a call, or they would shadow me in a meeting or a call, and we'd come out and
Yeah.
they say, you should have maybe used this approach, or you shouldn't have done this, you shouldn't have done that. So it was very informal. But I do, especially given the feedback I get regularly now, I think it's important that companies invest in having formal coaching around communication, and really, if they don't, it's to the detriment of their staff and ultimately their clients.
Yeah. You know something? We don't know what we don't know. Somebody who's just entered the workforce will come with what school, college, university has given them. They won't necessarily come fully formed and fully ready to enter the workplace, where the communication styles and channels are actually quite different. And that's where that coaching, that development stuff can be to set out for people the options, why some options are preferred over others, why some are better received than others. And so we're helping nurturing along those that need that. It's possible that somebody gets to their 50s and 60s and hasn't figured it out for themselves, hasn't received that help, but they can still learn. We're all about lifelong learning. So whatever stage somebody's at, whether they're just entering the workforce or whether they're entering the last employment before retirement, we can help them. To flip that around, if somebody offers you help, be prepared to accept it.
A few years back, I was asked, actually, it must be more than a few years, pre-COVID, I was asked to give a talk, one of the top private schools in Edinburgh, and it was to their, I think, the final year students who were going to go out into university the next year. And I gave the talk and invited questions afterwards, and I got some brilliant questions and
Yeah,
really challenged by some of the students, which I thought was fantastic. But the biggest thing I noticed was like their confidence and communication style was absolutely brilliant,
yeah,
compared to, I'd say your average 17, 18-year-old. They were extremely confident, and you could have put them in a commercial environment without a problem. And I actually asked one of the teachers there, I commented on it, and I said, "Oh, this is incredible how confident they are." And she said that they're trained to be that confident. We teach them courses in that. And I think, not to get into the debate around private and public education, I don't really have strong feelings on it one way or another, but I do think, just as your point on communication, they can be trained, and it
yeah.
can be developed. And I think going to that top private school was and experiencing the communication skills from those pupils was testament to that. And I thought, what a brilliant foot up they've got when they're going for their first interviews, and
It,
what a
it
foot up they've
does
got in
it
life.
does beg the question that if people who go to a private school are coming out better able to communicate and to engage, and I am with you. I'm not going to judge the rights and wrongs of public or private education, but if they're coming out and an industry is reckoning that they're at a better place, doesn't that beg the question why that has to be a private school thing? Because surely giving children knowledge and skills is the role of all educators.
I agree. It's a really interesting point you make, Nick. I've got two little boys, and one of them's just going into P3, and it's interesting because the first few years now of primary school is just essentially play. There is a
Yeah,
little bit of learning, but it's an interesting point you make, because it's true, early on in their education it is very much soft skills that they're developing. Now it's different. When I was at school, you sit at a desk in P1, and you'd work out. I know they've given up on that, but it's quite an interesting point you make, that I don't know if it's the same case. Fourth, fifth, sixth year, maybe we need to be investing more in the soft skills of our young people, and as opposed to teaching them some of the skill set they probably will never use in the workplace thereafter.
yeah. It strikes me that we run a risk, and maybe the risk is that young folks, and I'm not restricting it just to young folks, young adults and others, unless they have the ability or can improve their ability to see things through other people's eyes, to walk a mile, as the North American Indian saying goes, walk a mile in somebody else's shoes, then we actually tend to become quite entrenched where we are. We see the world from our perspective and don't accept that there are other perspectives. And so sometimes it does us good to kind of go sit on the other side of the table, or to, walk in somebody else's shoes for a mile, just to sort of see what life looks like for them in the role that they fulfill.
Absolutely, no, I agree with that. Like, just going back to the point, I'm not long back from a holiday with my kids, who are 5 and 7, and also my sister's young children, and my sister was there, and what struck me, uh, is that young children have got so much energy and determination, and they don't. For example, when you're a baby, nobody says, "I'm not going to walk. It's too hard." They just
Yeah,
persevere, and they keep going, and they don't give up. The other thing with young kids, as you'll know yourself, Nick, is they don't really take no for an answer very easily. So if they want an ice cream or they want chocolate, they'll do a massive sales pitch on you to get that. And it's got me thinking about the innate sense of tenacity and perseverance that young people have. But where does it go as we get older?
compliance. I think as we get older, we are taught to comply with a set of rules. Now, the set of rules could vary depending on what role we're fulfilling in life. It could be that it's something to do with that the workplace acts like this, and therefore follow those rules, and you'll be okay. but that doesn't necessarily make it right. And there's maybe ways that we can play within the rules without losing our curiosity that we had as a child, the creativeness, the energy that we had as a child. And very often, folks that do well have curiosity and creativity and energy that they carry with them all through life. So I don't think as we get older that the need to comply should destroy us. I think it can actually be something that we kind of work with, as a part of what we need to do. Because we live in society, and in society, we do have to, play by a set of rules. Doesn't mean to say we can't challenge them, doesn't mean to say we can't accommodate them. But yeah, I think there I would go. Curiosity for me is something that always drives me on as an adult.
Absolutely. I don't think curiosity is something you need to lose as you go on in your career. I think there's always avenues to explore. And actually, the topic I'd like to speak to you about in the next episode next week is around some of the technology advances that are coming up. And I
Yeah,
think those should be embraced regardless of, or should be explored at least regardless of age or stage in career. But I'll bet it's not necessarily down to age with that. It's just down to retaining a curiosity throughout your career that should stand us all in good stead.
yeah. No, absolutely. I think as we get older, retaining some of those kind of youthful aptitudes is a good thing for us. You mentioned earlier in the conversation about, I think he said pipe and slippers or something like that. There may well come a time in life when it's appropriate for us to just relax, sit in the armchair and not worry about doing anything. But I would say, as far as we can do, let's stay interested, let's stay curious, let's stay engaged. And it does come back to that demeanor thing I talked about. Sometimes you'll have somebody in their 60s still full of energy, running around and able to do things, and you maybe come across somebody who's 20 years younger who's already settled into the pipe and slippers.
I'm going to ask you a tough question just to finish up, Nick. So, if someone's in, the 50s now, which is young, given that, people are going to be working right up until, if they want to collect the pension 67,
Yeah.
if you're in a career you've lost, I suppose, the curiosity and the mojo for what you're currently doing. And it's really common, I think, we work for a long time and we could be working for 40, 45 years in the same job. If you get to your 50s and, maybe that's midlife these days and you're having a bit of a midlife crisis around, what do I do for the next 10, 15 years of work? What's your advice to those people?
Go check out options. You might have a nice, safe, comfortable job, earning a salary that gives you all you need. You've got other things that you can do. That job doesn't occupy you 24/7. It presumably gives you enough time to maybe consider whether you could volunteer in some way, use the skills, the experience, the qualifications that you've got in the workplace and apply them in a different way. You could consider going part-time and using the time that you've been given back by maybe moving down to 3 days a week to go pursue a new interest, go back to learning, start your own business on the side. Sometimes when we think about change, we think it's either this or that. Why can't we have, as well as hybrid working where we're part-time in the office and part-time at home, why can't we go for hybrid where we're actually working in a portfolio way where we've got 2 or 3 roles that we do 1-2 days a week?
Absolutely. That's good advice, Nick. I do see some professionals pursuing a portfolio type role later on in the career, and I think it can be successful, but not without its challenges. Certainly, I don't think it's an easy option to be juggling multiple clients, and yeah, there's certainly a business development aspect to it, and it wouldn't come naturally to some people. But I think you make a very good point there. Fantastic, really insightful as ever, and hope you take the time to join me again next week.
Yeah, looking forward to it, Andrew. Thanks very much for the conversation today. I've really enjoyed it.
Thanks, Nick.
Cheers.